Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. You will hear this more than once if you follow my videos this weekend, but I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas from my family to yours. It's hard to believe we have reached the final 2 weeks of the NFL season. In years past, the last 2 weeks have been more times than not just been a formality, but this year there are several games with playoff implications. In this video, I'm going to break down the quarterback position for the main slate Sunday, which includes 11 games. And before I get into the chart or any of that, I'm going to break down the lines and totals for the 11 games. Arizona at Seattle has the highest game total. Seattle's a 10-point favorite at home. Game total is 51. New Orleans is at Tennessee. New Orleans is a 3-point road favorite, and the over-under is 50. Baltimore visits Cleveland. Baltimore is a 10-point road favorite. The game total is 48.5. Cincinnati visits Miami Dolphins. Game total is 47, and the game is a pick. Jacksonville's at Atlanta. Atlanta's a 7-point home favorite. Game total 46.5 points. Carolina is at Indianapolis. Indianapolis is a 7-point home favorite with a game total of 46. The Dallas Cowboys visit the Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas is a 2.5-point road favorite with a game total of 45.5 points in the battle for the NFC East. Oakland visits the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are a 6.5-point home favorite with a game total of 45. The Giants are at Washington. Washington's a 2.5-point home favorite with a game total of 41. Pittsburgh is at the Jets. Pittsburgh is a 3-point road favorite with a game total of 38 points as Le'Veon Bell faces his old team. And Detroit's at Denver. Denver's a 7-point home favorite with a game total of 37.5 points. And those games are in order of the game totals because some mixed up as far as times and whatnot. But I did it in order of the game totals. And again, the highest total game on the board is Arizona at Seattle. Seattle's a 10-point home favorite with a game total of 51, and the lowest is Detroit at Denver. Denver's a 7-point home favorite with a game total of 37.5 points. Now, to this chart, I developed this a few weeks ago, about mid-season, and I've been working on it. And I encourage you guys to please drop any opinions or comments that you may have, some things that you might want to see, because I'm still going to do this even in the last week of the season and also through the playoffs, and then I'll revise it, and I want to build this channel and have some nice things moving forward. But to just break it down in case you're new to my channel, obviously the colors, the green is the best, yellow is middle of the road, and the red is worse. Now that's for in comparison to that category. Obviously Lamar Jackson, and if you the colors over here to the left, and we'll get into that, those are the ones that I'm going to be targeting for my player pool. And but you can see here, like Lamar Jackson, he's red as far as pass attempts per game. That doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback. Obviously, he's probably the leading candidate for the MVP this year. That just means in comparison to other quarterbacks in that particular category. The categories that I have, other than the name, teams, and their salary and their opponent, this is for quarterbacks, it's pass attempts per game, their completion percentage, their fantasy points scored per game, how many fantasy points their opponent allows to that position, to the quarterback position, what their opponent's ranking is versus the quarterback position in comparison to the rest of the NFL. And this is the implied team total with taking into consideration the overall game total. This is how many points they think their team will score. So with that being said, these are the quarterbacks that I'm going to be targeting in week 15 and why, utilizing this chart and a few other things that I have. And for those of you who are new to this channel, what I do is I do a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and then a tight end, defense, special team video. And I follow that up. I put it all together, summarize it into a lineup building video where I build some lineups and use an optimizer utilizing just these players that I'm going to be putting in my player pool. I encourage you to use this chart however you may like. Screenshot it, pause the video, write these numbers down, and use it how you would like to use it. These are the quarterbacks that I'm going to be putting in my player pool, and let's get started. Number one, Lamar Jackson. He's the most expensive quarterback in the main slate, 8,000. Now he's only averaging 26.4 pass attempts per game. He has a middle of the road completion percentage of 66.2%. He scores the most fantasy points per game out of the quarterbacks on the main slate. Cleveland gives up 18.3 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is a middle of the road ranking of 14. And this is the second highest implied total on the board. With Jackson, I mean, the 8,000 is really expensive. And the good thing about Jackson is you don't necessarily have to stack him. With Jackson, I feel like you get two players for the price of one. You get a running back and you get a quarterback. So the 8,000 is valid if you can get up there with what he offers as far as his rushing floor. This game has the third highest total for the week, and he's going to have high ownership at 20%. If I did stack him with some players, which I normally more times than not, I want to stack a quarterback with at least one target. If I stack him with anybody, obviously it would be one of the tight ends, preferably Mark Andrews or maybe Hollywood Brown, the wide receiver. This is a division game. I'm sure Cleveland would like nothing more than to beat them again. So this is a revenge game for Baltimore. One of their losses was to the Browns, and it was pretty handedly. Browns handed it to them in Baltimore. So Jackson's been phenomenal this year. As I mentioned, he's probably the leading candidate for the MVP. I'll probably be above the 20% if I can get up to him. I like that with him. There's another player that's similar at another position, McCaffrey. He's one of those players that's two players in one, a running back and a wide receiver. So don't let that 8,000 scare you off if you can get up there. And there's not a lot of stacking pieces as far as for Baltimore or bringing it back with some of the Cleveland pieces. I'm not really interested in that, but he is one of the quarterbacks that I have used and just used him by himself and did well. I mean, with the 29.2 fantasy points per game, that's what you need for that salary, preferably more. I mean, that's over 3 times the value, but he will definitely be in my player pool. Next up is Russell Wilson from Seattle. He's $7,000 cheaper than Lamar Jackson. He's averaging 31.8 pass attempts per game, has a 67.4% completion percentage. He's scoring 22.4 fantasy points per game. Arizona's given up 26 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is the worst in the NFL. They have a ranking of number 32. The highest implied total on the board. This game has playoff implications for Seattle. They're in the middle of the number one spot in the NFC. And this sets up really nice for Wilson at home. Now, ideally, Seattle wants to run the ball. So what you need for Russell Wilson is for Arizona to do their part in the scoring. Now, they're a 10-point favorite with a game total of 51. But you still need Seattle to push back. I'm not super crazy about Wilson. It is a good spot for him. I wish the gap between him and Jackson was a little bit closer because oftentimes I'll say, well, I'll just spend the extra $100 or $200 and go up to or go down to. You got $1,000 in between. So doesn't take much for him to get value. I mean, his average for the year is 22.4, which is 3 times value at that price, and it's a really good matchup. They're playing for something. Arizona is not playing for anything, which those teams are oftentimes dangerous. But Arizona, in their last 9 games, has allowed an average of 319 passing yards per game to the quarterback. So he's got lower projected ownership than Lamar Jackson, 5% ownership right now. And I'll have some of him, and obviously, if I can get to him, it doesn't necessarily mean I can find the other 1,000 to get up to Jackson, but I will have a good share of him. Probably be above the 5% in my player pool, but I will have some exposure to Russell Wilson. Drew Brees from New Orleans is 6,900 facing Tennessee. Brees is averaging 34.4 pass attempts per game, 75.8 completion percentage. Best on this main slate. I think it's the best in the NFL. He's averaging 22.1 fantasy points per game. Tennessee's has given up 18.8 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is a ranking of 16, so middle of the NFL. And this is the third highest implied total on the main slate, with an implied total of 26.8 points. It's the second highest total on the board with 50 points. There should be some scoring in this game. That's what Vegas is telling us with that 50-point total. Brees on the road the last few years hasn't been the thing to do. Coming off a really big emotional Monday night where he passed up Peyton Manning and became the all-time leader in passing touchdowns. But it doesn't stop there because Brady's right behind him. And depending on how long these two play, that record could go back and forth. Brees is they are somewhat in the hunt for some things have to fall in place for them to get home field throughout the playoffs, but they are playing for something, and so isn't Tennessee. And Tennessee's coming off that loss last week to Houston, so they need this game, and with that, if they can do their part and do the scoring, the way and force Brees to the air, you could see a really good game out of Brees. I'm just worried about him coming off of the Monday night, and his ownership right now is 9%. Small road favorite, which I oftentimes like for the quarterback position. As I mentioned, the second highest game total on the board. So you can't go wrong with Brees. It's not a situation where if I got to him, then I would feel like I needed to get up to Wilson, and there was just such a big gap between Lamar Jackson and Wilson and Brees. But Brees is definitely usable and will be in the player pool this week. Next up is Dak Prescott. He's at 5% ownership right now. He's averaging 37.1 pass attempts per game, which is on this. It's one of the highest on this chart. You have Dalton, Blau, and Ryan ahead of him. But he's got a 65.5% completion percentage. He's averaging 23.3 fantasy points per game. Philadelphia's given up 18.9 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is a ranking of 17 in the NFL, kind of in the middle. Not that high of a implied game total, 24.5 points. I have Dak in yellow because of the AC injury to his shoulder. He was supposed to, there were 2 days that he didn't throw. He's supposed to throw some today. So we'll have to wait and see. And obviously, when I do the lineup building video tomorrow, we'll address this more. He is expected to play, and Dak has been the glue to this team. It's not Ezekiel Elliott, it's Dak Prescott. How Dak goes, the Cowboys go, and they need him for this game. This game is a playoff game. The winner is probably going home because next week the Eagles play the Giants and the Cowboys play the Redskins, and the loser of this game has to hope the other team loses. It's interesting that Dallas is going into Philadelphia as an underdog or as a favorite, 2.5 points in Philly in this type of game. I do like his price at 6,400. And I would feel a lot more comfortable about it. Obviously, if he would probably be my top pick this week if it wasn't for that shoulder. He is in the earlier game this year where they pretty much just dismantled Philadelphia 37-10. He's had a lot of good games against Philly, and if the injury doesn't hold him back, I think that will come true again. Philadelphia is really beat up at the wide receiver position, and that's kind of how you want to attack the Cowboys. I do think this game will have some scoring. The game total, again, is only 45.5 points. I actually kind of like the over in this game, and think because it's a phenomenal matchup for Amari Cooper as well, that means Dak Prescott has to be involved. But we'll see, and I'll be reading more on the injury. Don't forget, you can also follow me on Twitter at Winning About, and I try to post updates to injuries and things like that. Next up is Matt Ryan. Ryan has 6% ownership right now. He is 6,200, and they're playing Jacksonville. Ryan's averaging 40 pass attempts per game, which is the third highest on the main slate. He's got a 66.5% completion percentage, 21.5 point fantasy points per game average. The Jacksonville Jaguars are giving up 19.9 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is a ranking of 22, which is the bottom third, and a higher third highest implied total this week at 26.8 points at home. This is a really good matchup for Matt Ryan, and Jacksonville has been giving up a lot on the ground, but um, the Falcons don't move the ball through the on via the ground game that much. He's averaging 40 pass attempts per game. The scary thing is when you get these teams that aren't really playing for anything, and towards the end of the season, and this is one of those games. Both these teams are eliminated from playoff contention, and Atlanta is a 7-point uh, home favorite. I do feel that they'll move the ball through the air. It's a fantastic matchup for Julio Jones, similar to what I said about Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper's matchup. For Julio to have a fantastic matchup, there's only one way Julio gets the ball, and that's if Matt Ryan throws it to him. Calvin Ridley out. Also, you have the tight end Hooper, so he's definitely got some targets, and I look for them. I think this game will definitely be higher scoring. It's got a game total of 46.5 points. And in the last 4 games, he's averaged actually higher than what his season average is of 40. He's actually averaged 42.4 pass attempts per game. So I will have more of Matt Ryan than any of the quarterbacks that I've mentioned so far. Next up, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I got him in yellow. I'm kind of on the fence with this because the way to move the ball against Cincinnati is through the ground. That's why they have good passing numbers. Teams don't have to pass against Cincinnati, so they can run the ball. The thing about Miami is they're depending on some guys that Myles Gaskin and Patrick Laird, who are at the beginning of the year. I'm not even sure they were on the active roster, but Fitzpatrick's averaging 31.5 pass attempts per game. He has a completion percentage of 61.6%. He's averaging 15.8 fantasy points per game. Cincinnati's given up 20.3 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is 23rd in the NFL. Implied total is 23.3, so it's not really high. It doesn't really check off a lot of the boxes. I am interested in this game and stacking it different ways with pieces of Cincinnati and Miami, because those pieces are lower priced and allows you to spend up and build and correlate with other players. But 6,000, a little bit high. I mean, you're going to have to definitely get above his average. I think Cincinnati will be able to put some points on the board. The game total at 47, so it's one of the highest ones. It's the fourth highest on the main slate. So I will have some exposure to Fitzpatrick. But with Fitzpatrick, and one of the main reasons I have him in yellow too, is if I'm at 6,000 and I really like Matt Ryan this week in his matchup at home, 200 more is probably something where I can adjust my defense and get up to Ryan. I'll have some exposure to him. And like I said, I'm interested in stacking this game a lot of ways, but we'll get to the other quarterback here in a minute in this game. Next up, Phillip Rivers. He's 5,700. He's averaging 36.1 pass attempts per game, 65.6% completion percentage. He's scoring 18.1 fantasy points per game. Oakland's given up 23.4 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is number 30 overall in the NFL. Decent implied total of 26 points. The game total again on this is only 45 points. Oakland's coming in. Josh Jacobs is ruled out, so that might mean Oakland's got to throw the ball more, which maybe this game will go back and forth. But the Chargers have a better defense, and that worries me a little bit with Rivers because they can rely on their running game, and with Gordon and Eckler, and Gordon's price down this week too. They're not playing for anything. I think the Raiders actually have an outside chance, but and surely the Chargers, if they do have an outside chance come game time, I'm sure the Chargers would like nothing more than to put the final nail in the coffin for him. He's averaging 309 passing yards in his last 4 games and 1.8 touchdowns per game in the last 4. So 5,700 allows you to spend up in some other areas and be a pivot off of some of these higher priced quarterbacks. His ownership is sitting at about 6% right now, and he does like to sling the ball, and he likes to get it to Eckler out of the backfield too. You got Hunter Henry there and Keenan Allen, and I will have some shares of him so that I can get up to some of the more expensive players in other positions. Last is Andy Dalton for Cincinnati. Really can't believe I'm saying this. He's 5,200 playing the Dolphins, but Dalton is averaging the most pass attempts per game on the main slate. Of course, Winston averages a lot, but he's actually playing on Saturday. He's averaging 40.4 pass attempts per game. He's got a low completion percentage of 59.7. He's only averaging 16.2 fantasy points per game. Miami's given up 22.6 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is a ranking of number 26 versus the quarterback in comparison to the rest of the NFL. Implied total of 23.3 points, and Fitzpatrick was 23.3. Yeah, and this game is a pick. The game total is 45. These teams aren't playing for anything except jockeying for draft picks, and I could see this game really going back and forth. Fitzpatrick likes to sling the ball. Dalton's slinging the ball, and recently Cincinnati has had an emphasis of getting Joe Mixon the ball, which I'll talk about in my next video. He's averaging 19 carries per game the last 3 games. He's gotten at least 19 carries, so that takes away a little bit from the passing. But 5,200, it doesn't take much to get value. And I will have some of him and some of Fitzpatrick, and there's lots of ways to stack this game using some of the receivers and the tight ends that are viable and running backs, and that allows me to get up and spend in other areas that I want to spend up for this weekend. So and another thing about Dalton real quick, Miami is allowing 297.8 passing yards in their last 4 games and 2.5 touchdowns per game through the air. That's in their last 4, their average. So summing up the quarterbacks for my Week 16 player pool, it was Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, Dak Prescott. We're going to be checking Dak's injury, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow during my lineup building videos. So if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscriber become a subscriber, and then hit that notification bell so you get notified when my next video posts, and I'll be covering that when I do my lineup building. Matt Ryan, I have a lot of interest in him this week. Probably my favorite of the week at the price and the way the game sets up and the overall matchup. Ryan Fitzpatrick, I like him. I'm not super crazy about the price. I would probably go to Dalton at his price and then get pieces of Miami to fit in there. But very interesting. He's on the fence. And another thing that, as I mentioned, the way you move the ball against Cincinnati is on the ground. That's why when you see the numbers for Cincinnati's pass defense, you would probably think, oh, they're really good against the pass. No, it's because teams don't really have to pass against them. Um, Phillip Rivers at 5,700, very viable at that price, and game really good matchup for the Chargers through the air. And I'll have some shares of him. And last, and I was just talking about him, Andy Dalton at 5,200. He's about as low as I want to go this week at 5,200. I don't have much interest in the other quarterbacks. And I like that they're putting the ball in the air a lot. I know they do want to get Joe Mixon involved, but they're not playing for anything. And maybe Fitzpatrick and Dalton will come out and sling the ball. This game just has the look of a game that could be really high scoring, back and forth. These teams don't have anything to lose. They can go for it on fourth down if they want, and take chances and do all kinds of things. So, and Dalton might be auditioning for a job for another team. So we'll see. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. I encourage you to please drop any opinions or comments that you may have below. Please share this video, like it, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that notification bell so you get notified when my next video posts. My subscriptions have been going up, and I really appreciate it. And my viewers have really shot up, and I'd really, really like to see some of you viewers become subscribers. You don't have anything to lose, and you can give me a chance. It's for free, and I got some really good information. I'll be coming back shortly with my running back video and going over that, the running backs I'm targeting in week 16. You can also follow me on Twitter at winningabout. And as I mentioned, I'll be back shortly with the running back video. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.